this is our bi-weekly check-in where we talk about everything executive production and tune in on In Process. How you doing today, CY?
I'm doing really great. Fully relaxed after 4-day weekend. How are you feeling, Sweets?
I'm back in the United States, land of the free and the home of the brave. So we are in Florida right now, planning on going to Miami for Art Basel this weekend, and me and the cats made it. It's the first time I don't know if you can see, it's the first time my cats have been in the States since we left for Argentina in 2022. So
wow,
it was a big trek for me to bring them back, but I'm getting closer to 30 and starting to think of my cats more as my kids, and I want to minimize the time I'm spending away from them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Those are the best traveled cats I know. I'm seriously impressed. You brought them like up and down North and South America. Yeah. Amazing.
I talk that they've traveled more than most humans. Like they've been to Argentina, absolutely. They've been to Chile, they've been to Colombia, they've been all over the US.
Yeah. Super
impressive. So for today, what we've been building, the 3 points that I talked about before this, I'll start with the one that we highlighted is collection timelines, a new feature that's coming out on In Process in the next 7 days. Always want to check in with you on what your most painful process is on In Process, and if we get around to it, talking about storage costs on In Process and how the Farcaster team of Dan and Varun are thinking about spam and storage costs, and just giving us a moment to talk through that.
Yep.
Collection timelines. I'll get started on that by sharing my screen and just talk through some of the architecture changes. So for everybody that's not aware, In Process right now, it is a timeline of collections. So we've got, when you go to the create page, you are creating a new collection with one moment on that collection, one token ID on that collection. And then when you come back to the create page, you are creating a new collection with one item on that collection. So if you go to Cab, who's a new person that just published, this person I met in person for the first time at DevConnect. They're from Brazil, and they just started using it as a result of seeing Latasha talk about it for a while and then meeting me in person at DevConnect. So right after DevConnect, they published their first one, and now they've published a bunch of what they did at the Kismet Casa residency in Argentina for DevConnect. And as you can see, most of these make sense to likely be in the same collection. This is a work that she did where you've got the individuals, and then the latest one is a GIF of all of them together. But when you click into each of these, this first one starts with 68F, so that's one contract address. This one starts with 87A, that's another contract. So each of these lives on their own contract, and they all are at token ID 1. So that's the current architecture, is you have each moment is its own collection, and each collection only has one item on it. So the contract metadata is the same as the token metadata. There's no difference between the collection itself and the moment. They're tightly coupled ideas. Where we're leaning towards is at the protocol level, these are 1155 contracts, and we are already supporting in our URL structure that this is the first token ID on this. This is a fork of Zora. So Zora, this was the Zora that was before the forced price to 0. This was before they switched to the coins. And so this was the last version that artists really valued on In Process, or on Zora, where you get to pick your own price. You have collections. It's already supported on the protocol level, just the UI. The biggest barrier in my mind was we kept waiting on designs to give us collection timelines. And now that we're product and engineering first, we're just building it out. And so the changes we've been making so far, so this is our indexer. This is running on both Base and Base Sepolia. We have it hosted on Envio. So far, we don't pay anything for this. It's entirely hosted for free. And this focuses on indexing events, 52,000 events on Base, 7,000 on Base Sepolia. And what we have inside of here are all of the events. So whenever you add an admin, onto one of your collections, you can get all of the admin events. And so here you'll see this is the admin address, this is the collection. And so when you go into In Process and then you make a split, every address you add in here then becomes an admin. And so this is how we index those events, is we query for the admins. On the collections, this is how we get the collections that are created. So whenever a new contract is deployed, we are indexing all of those events. So we have the contracts. We also have moments. Moments are a specific token ID. And so what we have now added is a distinction between the collection being created and a moment being created. And so even though our UI is not supporting it right now, if another dev is deploying new tokens on in process, new moments on an existing contract, we are already indexing those moments here. Those should show up on the timeline already. If not, that's another change we need to make, but I believe they would already show up on the timeline, but they're all going to show up on, so for Cab, because they published a ton, it's all going to show up on this artist timeline, which is a collection of everything. What else do we have? So we've got admins, collections, moments, sales. Sales are the sales strategies. So right now, In Process supports 2 different sales strategies. One is ETH sales, which would be a currency set to 0. That's the fixed price sales strategy. Or there's USDC sales, which would have a non-zero currency. And the only currency so far that musicians and artists have used is USDC. However, if Cab, for example, wants to list moments in their own creator coin, we already support that. Our index already supports it. Our UI on the create page does not support it, but it would just be, instead of hard coding USDC, giving an additional bring your own token. And if they did that, the index already supports it. The database already supports it. I'm unsure if our front end supports it. So if a musician's listening or an artist is listening to this and they would like to list in their own creator coin and they want to do it in the next 7 days, let me know, send me a message, and then we can make sure that you're supported on that, because our goal is to be able to support any currency, even if we're prioritizing USDC and ETH. So sales are the sales strategies. You can list in multiple sales strategies, but so far we're visualizing that artists are only going to want to sell on the front end in one thing. So instead of supporting, I want to sell for 0.0004 ETH and 1 USDC and making people pick between that, we're visualizing that artists are actively only going to want to list for sale in one thing. If that changes over time, we can update it. Our indexer supports it. The only restriction where we are not supporting that mental model is in our Supabase table. We're in Supabase listing only the latest. And if someone makes a new sale, we're assuming the new sale is what they want to replace the old sale. And so Supabase will overwrite. If, for example, I started listing it in ETH and then I go into the manage page and then I change to list in USDC, we're going to update in Supabase to say this person only wants to sell this moment in USDC. And then on the front end, their ETH sale would disappear. And so this moment, for example, right now is listed for ETH. If Cab decides, hey, nobody's buying this because it's listed in ETH instead of USDC, if Cab goes onto the manage page, changes it from ETH to USDC, Supabase would replace the ETH sale for USDC. And then on the front end, you would only see the USDC sale and not ETH. If for some reason in the future we want to list for multiple, we can. So far, talking between me and my dev team, we haven't found a real reason. Feel free to pause me at any time if you want to push.
Keep going. This is good. This is
okay.
Really good.
Cool. So those are the sales. And then finally, we should have comments. Comments are our purchase event. So even if you don't leave a comment, we are indexing the comment event, and then the comment field is just set to 0. And so these are our purchase events where you have a buyer, which we label as sender here, and then a collection, the ID, and then the transaction hash. So these are all of those purchases that happen. Yeah, these are the purchases. And then if they left a comment, you can see those comments. So that's the backend. The deep level the protocol hasn't changed. It's a fork of Zora. We haven't changed that at all. The only thing that we've added over the past couple months is supported a new minter, which is the ERC20 minter, and we're using that for USDC sales. It also supports any other coins that artists want to sell in. The indexer then reads things that are happening at the protocol level on Base and on Base Sepolia. This allows us to not have to do RPC queries every time we want to get the entire history of an artist. That all gets eaten up here. So that way we have a clean list that we can query with gRPC to be able to get comments, admins to know on my manage page what should be my moment versus a mutual moment that I was added to. Collections, that shows me the collections that I own and that I've created, the contract addresses. Comments, which show when things have been purchased and the comments that were left when people purchased. Sales, which are the artist listing for sale, giving it a price and a currency, sale start, sale end for that sale. And then the moments, which are items inside of a collection. Any question on the indexer before I move over to Supabase?
Can you expand a bit on what NVO? I can see what you're doing here inside the NVO UI, but what is NVO in general?
NVO is in Indexer Tech. Let me go back to their homepage just to get with the fastest, most flexible way to get data on chain. So this is, it's a framework that allows us to build indexers. Mm-hmm. Originally, when we built in Process, we built our own indexer. Yep. And so we had a while loop, an infinite while loop that every time the while loop finished, it give me the latest set of events since the last time we checked. And then we home rolled our own ability to do that. It was what gets built needs maintained, and what we build, we have to make our own mental models around. And so when we built our own indexer first, and then we found it didn't scale well. There were bugs that we didn't think about. We had to write and maintain our own code. It wasn't as fast as other solutions. It cost us more to run than other solutions. And the more artists were telling us, hey, this isn't showing up on the timeline. Right. Why isn't our indexer catching this? Why did our indexer miss this specific moment that this artist is missing? And the more that we were asking that question, we just started to say, why are we maintaining this instead of building on someone that already is focused on top tier indexing, and allow us to focus on focusing on supporting collections, building a front end experience. Right. And so my best friend Samir, when we were at ETH Denver, I think 2 years ago, and the NVO team reached out to us. So we decided to use NVO. Another product that exists is Ponder. Ponder is another solution that exists. I have had trouble hosting Ponder on low-cost solutions. Mm-hmm. And so far, we don't pay anything for NVO. So another competitor is Ponder. Before NVO and Ponder, everybody used the Graph, which is its own standalone blockchain. And it's expensive. And now everybody else, since the Graph came out, is saying the Graph is slow, the Graph is expensive. And so at this point in time, very few people are using the Graph. People have left the Graph to move over to NVO and Ponder. There might be some other products, but these are the two that the majority of devs today use.
Right. How deep is the integration that's necessary for us to be using NVO versus some other future emergent solution? Or I guess, like, how tied are we to NVO at this point now that we've offloaded indexing to them?
Great question. So with NVO, as I just showed you, they have a GraphQL endpoint. So we could, on the front end, directly be querying NVO, and that would directly go from the front end is reading the latest data from the database. But I had the same thought you did. I don't know how tied I want to be to NVO. Mm-hmm. And so that is why we still have our Supabase layer.
Got it.
Supabase is our database, and that allows us, we have a cron that runs once a second, and then it brings the data from the indexer into our database. And that gives us a little bit of separation so that if we decide NVO is getting too pricey, NVO is trying to change their mental model, we can kick NVO out, swap over to Ponder, and then the front end is reading from our database. So we can totally get rid of an indexer. Maybe we, in our 5 seconds of transitioning, when we go from one to another, maybe the homepage might miss a couple moments, but we swap one indexer out for another. The front end is always reading from the database. And then the database gives us that independence from relying too heavily on any indexer.
Got it. Right. Okay. Love that.
So that's our indexer. Indexer gets the latest events from the blockchain. That way, the front end, as soon as you create a moment, it shows up on the homepage. It shows up on your manage page. It's right there immediately. We then have this little cron. My goal is to move that over to Vercel eventually. For now, that is on our own hosted infrastructure. So again, the same mental model. Why are we hosting this on our own infrastructure when we could be building on Vercel? That is focused on scaling, focused on having uptime. I want to get rid of that. I won't show that because it's harder to show. Yeah. All that does is it ferries information from the indexer into this database. This database, before this moments table or this admin table, we had token admins. So this is what the front end is currently reading from, is token admins. And the mental model here is an admin exists at the collection level. So you give someone an admin and it's for the entire collection. Mm-hmm. That's fine as long as it's a one-to-one between collections and items. But as you know with Zora, when you create a moment, you could give admin permission just on this single token ID. And in our current database structure, that doesn't exist. You have the token, which is the collection, and then you have the admin, and the admin has full rights to do anything on the entire collection. And so if Cab decides, hey, this single artist that I made this design of, I want to make them admin on this single thing. In our current mental model, we don't support that. If they wanted to give admin permission, you're giving admin permission on this entire thing. And so if for some reason this artist and Cab get into a fight, and then this artist decides to be malicious on some of these other moments, they could go and change the metadata, change the sale, and wreck everything. Where we're moving towards now is admins has a collection, it has a token ID. The admin also gets to pick whether this was another thing is if is the hidden state. The hidden state right now, we might have already updated it, but our original mental model, if CY hides the moment, if CY is on the same split as me on a moment, CY hides the moment, it also hides it on my profile. We don't want that. We want it so that if we're both admins, I added CY to this, CY didn't know, and he doesn't want this moment on his timeline, CY hides it. I don't, I still want it on mine. And so it gives each admin the ability to show a moment on their timeline or not.
Right.
Trying to speed this up so we can get more collaborative. API keys is a table that we use so that devs that want to build on us can do that. That's not part of this change. The next big change is this collections table. We have a table of collections, and this allows us to decouple. Right now, everybody uses in-process tokens, and it's tightly coupling between an address and a token ID. And the only token ID in the entire table is 0, which is the collection. We are now going to be deprecating in-process tokens. We will have in-process collections, which represents the top-level collection, the URI, the default admin, the payout recipient, created at, updated at. That's for the overall collection, the group of moments. And then we have moments table, which has a token ID. Again, only one for right now, but now we can support any number. URI, the max supply, created at, the collection that it's associated with, the updated at. We have sales, that hasn't changed. And I believe that might be all of the database changes. I'll pause there. I think that's all the database changes. Any other questions so far?
No, this is great.
Cool. The final, how are we doing? Okay, we're still okay on time. So now coming into what we're thinking about changing in the front-end user interface. So far, we have not, the changes we've made are we're slowly changing the back-end architecture, and the goal is changing everything without breaking anything on the front end. I think we've done a good job of that so far. I have not heard of anybody complaining of everything still showing up instantly. This one was about an hour ago from Duodo. Looks like you posted about an hour and a half ago.
Yep.
You got Piquet, nice, from Excellencia. So where we're thinking of next is how do we want to support collections in the front end interface?
Right.
The first is how do we allow an artist to create inside of a collection? The default mental model is what Zora had, which was on the create page, there's a drop. If you already have a collection, give me a drop down here where I can see all the collections I've already created, select a collection. And if I select a collection, instead of creating a new collection, this would create token ID 2 or preceding 3, 4 up to infinity of that token ID. Any pushback or thoughts? Do you agree that we should emulate Zora's mental model for creating inside of a collection, or do you have any thoughts on how we could improve the artist's ability and make it easier than Zora did for an artist to select a collection they want to create a new item in?
I mean, I think the most common scenarios are sort of what Cab was doing, where they had a predetermined set of things they just wanted to group together. And so, I mean, this is more UX than anything else, just having it an easy flow to batch a bunch of stuff which you already have sitting in storage or, in the hopper to put into a collection. And then the other scenario is, you've premeditated, hey, I'm doing a set of things for this purpose. They're going to be going into a collection, and being able to, I guess, create the collection that starts off maybe initially empty, knowing that you're going to put things in it. Or maybe we do, I don't feel strongly about creating an empty collection versus just creating a collection, and you have to have at least one thing to start.
Okay.
I don't at this point feel like there's a lot of scenarios where we need to have there's some UX constraint that requires us to structure things in a way that is not how Zora had done it when they had implemented it this way. Certainly when I was using it, and I wasn't a heavy user of collections, but I did use collections, I felt like what they had was sufficient. So I have no qualms about starting where they started. Their back end and front end like reflect each other. So we'll know once people start using it if there are other scenarios. So I guess maybe the first question is, can you create an empty collection and then not do anything with it?
You absolutely could. Yeah, I hadn't considered that, so I wasn't planning on building it out. If you visualize that that's something artists can do.
I don't think it's. I think if an artist comes into a situation where they need to do that, right now, for me, it's more of an intellectual exercise of like, hey, okay, I can make up something where it's like, okay, I'm executive producing something with an artist who says they're going to be doing a project where the first drop is sometime in the future. So in terms of them, having a thing on chain that represents, hey, we have this commitment, they could create the initial container. The collection can exist. And, once, a week or a month or whatever down the line where they start putting things in, that collection becomes the way that we have this communication of like, hey, this stuff is happening, it's showing up in here. So it's like allows for foreshadowing in terms of like having a container that is sort of sitting out there waiting to be filled, and people can track the container. There's ways, there's a construct for people outside that they can follow in some sense to see when stuff shows up, whether that's just the executive producer getting notified when stuff shows up in there, and as I'm describing this, I'm also thinking to myself, like, you don't need to have this reflected on chain, because this is a social contract as much as it is a technical contract. And I guess where it might be interesting is if other people want to know if an artist is doing things and they aren't the executive producer, where they have that where they have that conversation to say, like, yeah, we're going to do this. Yeah, I don't think it's a technical requirement.
Cool.
Unless someone out there right now can think of a reason why they'd want to deliberately create a container in advance of the first thing showing up in it. I don't think it's necessary to say it's an initial requirement.
If you're an artist watching this and you would like an empty shell and you want to be able to create a collection without putting a moment in it, reply in the comments below so that we can understand that there's other artists that want this feature. The next question is, how do people get to those moment timelines? So you've created the shell, you have a new executive production artist that you're working with. They've created the shell, they put a moment inside of it. The moment shows up on the home page. I click on the moment on the home page. I think ideally this takes me straight to the moment instead of this timeline.
Yep.
It seems to be the feedback from.
Yes, that is absolutely the feedback we've gotten. And I feel personally that's what I want.
So I click on the home page, I get straight here. Right now we have a back button that takes me back to the artist timeline. The question I have is, how would I get to seeing the timeline for a collection? Would we have a collection name in here and then 2 arrows up top for back? Or do you have any thoughts on how?
I think that's an easy way to get started with it. I think there is also the question, when you create a moment, like, do we require you to select a collection or make up a collection at that point? I don't recall how it was done in Zora, but it's like it adds friction if we oblige people to make a collection in order for the moment to live inside.
Yeah.
And so does that mean there's a default, like all of the, like, everything, the kitchen sink collection? Or does every collection just have or every moment that isn't prescribed to be in a collection just ends up? I guess that's what we have now. Every moment is its own contract, and that's fine.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think there's, okay, I think that does sort of raise the scenario where I might not realize things should be in a collection until after I've made a bunch of things and realize, oh, these are all kind of related. How do I get them together into a collection?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hardest thing, because they're all on chain on their own collections at that point. And so we could do some funny stuff behind the scenes, like delete the metadata off that collection, hide it from your profile, and then create new tokens. And then it's kind of ignoring the protocol and just being like, these things do exist on chain, but we're going to kind of pretend that they don't, and then do funny stuff at our back end and front end layers in protocol. And then we create new moments on the collection, and we only show those new items that are in the collection in our front end. Yeah. Or do we say,
I would just say we don't support that right now. We just time moves forward, and later on, if we need if we need things to be displayed a certain way after the fact, then we write UI to support that curation, essentially. I think this is a can we can kick down the road and figure out the right way to organize it later. I look at this a lot like how, historically artifacts show up, buried under the ground, and, archaeologists dig these things up, and maybe they don't realize they're related until two of them meet at a convention and say, oh, these random artifacts we have are from the same civilization. And then they were like, okay, well, how do we group these together? And that's where we are.
Excellent. So for now, I'm thinking I'll add the collection name with the image of the collection kind of right here. If you click on that, that takes you to the collection timeline. Other than that, are there any other ways you visualize an artist or a collector wanting to get to a collection timeline?
I think that's simple is the best way to start. And then we'll figure out as we go what scenarios we're not covering for. I think it is important for if you don't specify a collection, that we don't add all this UI to necessarily go, into the collection which just contains that one thing that you minted.
Yeah.
So there is some sort of special casing that we'll need to do to keep things looking simple. Yeah. So I guess the collection, like we'll put is that to be in like the advanced section? If you want to specify a collection?
It's another great question. Would you like it to be in the advanced section?
I think yes, because it's really important to me that the people who come on board don't feel like they're being dropped into Excel when all they want to do is write something in Word. That was a terrible analogy drawn from the 90s, but it's sort of like it should feel like I'm just here to leave a moment where I'm just typing something, like the lowest, the easiest form where you're just like writing a sentence and putting that on chain. I feel like that's important to preserve that simplicity. And for people who know exactly what they're doing, they can go in, break out the advanced thing, and then add all this additional stuff.
Keep it simple for new artists to be able to come on and create without mental friction of what is this collection thing. As we start to wrap up, do you have any other mental models or questions or feedback on our current path of collection timelines? Anything you want to leave us with?
I think it's really awesome that we're, in some sense, like going back through the tumultuous history of Zora, trying to figure out what it is and picking our favorite spot and forking that. I think that's a great, it's sort of a great story in terms of like what, open source is all about. Is like you can go and fork the thing that is best for you and take it where you want to go. And there's no like hurt feelings or anything. It's just there as a resource. And I look at all the experiments we're doing as artists and technologists in the current landscape where, we are documenting what we're doing, and people can take that idea and run with it their own direction. And there's no hard feelings. It's like, it's an open book. We're all experimenting. We don't have to align if we see something we like and we want to run with it. Like that's sort of the cultural construct I feel like we have right now. And eventually there'll be factions, and then, there'll be arguments. Like people always degenerate into these sort of like spaces, but there's just a magical moment of building right now where it is this ideas are abundant and directions are abundant. And let's enjoy it while we're here,
Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you in 2 weeks for the next executive production.